The desperation for validation and approval is killing my people. Purpose looks different in different seasons. That is fake. You're phony. You're fake, miss. Your business doesn't always need to be a community discussion. In order to know where you're going, you have to understand who you are. We need to free ourselves from the bondage and the prison of external validation and people's opinions. When we face insecurities, when we face imposter syndrome, it's because people don't know who they are. Some people are operating as counterfeits, as phonies, as fake versions of themselves. There's a part of us that are grieved when we're not walking in purpose. We don't need everybody's 2 pence. Just use your own 2 pence and go forward. That's another version of self-sabotage and self-betrayal. When we give our power to other people, it's time to step into the most authentic version of yourself, into the version that God created. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to a new episode of the Dreams, Money, Purpose podcast. I am your host, Noma. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back, bestie. Welcome back. Glad to have you here. For the newbies, we are a community of people who are focused on pursuing purpose and achieving our dreams and figuring out this adulting thing along the way. So we're going to do that together. On this episode, I want to start it off with a question and a statement. Question being, who are you? The command in this occasion is step into who you are. Now you may be thinking, that's an odd question to ask, or maybe an odd statement to make. I already know who I am. But as I was thinking about as individuals, how we pursue purpose and figuring out this again, adulting, as we chase our dreams and do all the things that we want to do, I think it's really important that we sometimes step back and reevaluate and rethink, who really am I and which space am I operating from? And for me, I really believe that in order to know where you're going, you have to understand who you are. In order to understand your purpose, your calling, you have to start at the starting point, which is you. You have to know who you are in order to go forth successfully, but also in fulfilling what you're really called to do. I think it's so easy to go in the wrong direction or to travel in the wrong direction when you don't know who you are, when you don't understand the purpose of the journey and what it is that you're setting out to do. And I've been reflecting on this and realizing that a lot of people, even especially adults, when we face insecurities, when we face imposter syndrome, it's because people don't know who they are. And what I mean by that is truly just going back to the basics. Nothing, super complex, but just truly going back to the basics of what they value, what they stand for, who they are in society, what they have been brought forth to do in respect of their abilities, their talents, their calling, simply because they have also allowed for society to determine who they are. We've allowed for society to build who we are. We've allowed for maybe friends, family, social media to dictate who we are, but we don't take the time out to just simply go back, stripping everything else that has been placed on us, the labels that have been placed on us, the names that have been placed on us, or what other people determined we should be doing or who we should be, and actually just going back to who am I? And I truly believe that you can't know who you are unless you ask the Creator. Sadly, for a lot of people, they have allowed for their identities and who they are, what they stand for, to be curated by social media, by their timeline. But only God can tell you who you are. Only God, who formed you, who created you for a purpose, for a season, who knows the innermost parts of you, who knows your abilities, your talents, what makes you special, what makes you stand out. Only He can determine who you are because He made you. For instance, a pot cannot call itself a kettle, and a kettle cannot call itself a plant pot. A plant pot cannot call itself something else, a cup, because you have to go to the Creator who made it to say, I made this particular thing, I made this jar, I made this clay pot, I made this teacup to serve a certain function. I made it to fulfill a certain purpose. It's the same thing with us, where in the journey of self-discovery, of self-growth, of getting to know who you are, but maybe even rediscovering who you are, it does take going back to the Creator, to God, and to figure out who am I, what is in me in terms of gifts, talents, etc., and what am I called to do. And with all of these things that make my identity, how does it fit into my purpose? One of the reasons why I think it's so important to know who you are is that when you're so secure, when your identity is concrete, there are no outside voices that can come in and manipulate you. There are no outside voices that can come in and make you question who you are, that can come in and start to shift who you are, the way that you act, the way that you behave, the way that you go about life, simply because your identity is solidified. And I think one of the things that you can easily see when people have insecurities, or sometimes even an imposter syndrome, truth be told, is that your identity is not secure. So it can easily be moved and shaken based on what other people are saying, based on other people's expectations of you, based on other people's desires, based on other people's opinions of who you are, based on other people's thoughts of how you should act or behave. But I don't know if you've ever come across that person where they just exude such confidence and they know who they are, their values, their morals, the way that they behave, the way that they go about life or treating other people. It's not shaken. It doesn't depend on who's in the room or what's been said about them, whether they get good feedback or negative feedback, or maybe even just like someone else's opinion. That someone else's opinion doesn't come in and suddenly they start to shift based on what someone else said. And I think this in particular can sometimes be a little bit more true for women as well. I think simply because as women, we have been conditioned to adhere to what society expects of us a lot of the time. And then sometimes you can see how, for instance, in a relationship, you see like a woman starts to shift. She starts to adjust who she is. She starts to shape shift almost to suit the environment, or to suit, maybe she's in a romantic relationship and her boyfriend says, oh, I like it better when you do your hair like this, or I don't like when you behave a certain way, or I don't like it when you XYZ. Suddenly her character, her personality, her identity starts to shift simply to accommodate somebody else, or to accommodate the person that she's in a relationship with. And again, that's where it's an example of where your identity or that person's identity was never solidified, but it was based on external circumstances, other people's opinions, other people's point of views, and other people trying to shift and change and manipulate them essentially. So my challenge for you is, it's time to step into the real you. It's time to step into the most authentic, the most real version of yourself. And I guess we can start off with the questions of, what do I value? Who am I? What are the quirks that make me special? The personality traits that I have that make me one in a million, that make me special, that make me stand out. As we grow up, we don't realize how, as I said before, how external circumstances come in and they start to infiltrate, they start to change and even shift in negative ways who we are. For maybe somebody who used to be so confident, extroverted, and a people person, because of maybe external circumstances, things that have happened, traumas and experiences, you start to see that person slowly but surely quiet themselves down. They start to almost, blend into the background. They're no longer as extroverted as they used to be. Now they're an indoor person, whereas before they used to be super, outdoors and engaging and, out and about. Even as we get older, we have to review, who is this version of me right now that's currently operating? Is it the me that has experienced traumas, that experienced heartbreaks? Is it the version of me that allowed for external circumstances, other people's opinions, other people's views to come in and shift who I am, to come in and infiltrate the personality that I had and manipulate who I am as a person, or change me from somebody who was quite confident and self-assured to somebody who is a little bit more insecure, someone who is a bit more quiet, or someone who's less bold, who's less likely to go out and chase after their dreams. Or maybe we've allowed for that one failure that we experienced, or maybe It could be bullying in the workplace. It could be bullying at school, or something that happened that just triggered a shift in our way of doing things, in our personalities, in our identities. So I think it's really important that we do go back and just going back to the drawing board of the current version of me that I see in the mirror, that I see operating day to day. Which version is this? Is this the version that I am happy to be, that I'm proud of, that I know this is the real authentic me, no filters, just raw? Or is it the me that has adapted to the things that happen to me? Which of course I understand, with life that happens, but I mean in the sense of where it's completely negative, it's stripped the real you, it's stripped away parts of you, it's stripped away maybe the confidence, maybe the self-assurance, it's stripped away, that glow that you used to have, that is stripped away the je ne sais quoi. I don't know what that word means, but you get my point. So just asking yourself those questions, like, am I showing up as the authentic me? Maybe even just going back to like 10-year-old you, if it requires going back that far. It's going back to the version of you that you were most proud of, the version of you that operated the most authentically and was so real in themselves, that wasn't manipulated, changed, or shifted by society or experiences, but the you that was truly you in the rawest form. Maybe that was the 10-year-old you, 15-year-old you, 20-year-old you, and then noting down, what was it about her that I loved? What was it about him that was so different to the me now? From there, how do I get back to that version? How do I get back to the version of me that loved with no bounds, that loved, was confident, that was daring, that was open to other people, that was curious about the world and wanted to explore? Was it a version of me that wasn't afraid to try new things and fail, or to explore the world around them and just do all of these things? Which parts of that version did you leave behind? And maybe which parts do you need to go back and take with you and bring back? Because there were some of the best parts of you. I wasn't even planning to go this way in the conversation, but yeah, maybe someone needs to hear that. It's unfortunate that I mean, again, with life be lifing, right? Life be lifing, and we experience the good and the bad and the ugly and the exciting things, but in all of that, sometimes the consequences is that we shift and change so dramatically based on those experiences that it's almost as if it's two completely different people sometimes. And we leave the best versions of ourselves in the past. But I think it's time, in this season, it's time to go back to that older version of you and pick up the best parts of her or him that you left behind. The best quirks, your personality traits, the areas of your personality that, brought joy to other people, the you that brought joy and maybe just a ray of sunshine into the room. It's time to bring back that version. It's time to step into the real you again. It's time to step back into the version of you that God created. I think it's quite unfortunate because some people are operating as counterfeits. Some people are operating as phonies, as fakes, as fake versions of themselves. They're operating as a version of themselves they have curated through social media and what they've seen online. But it's like, that's not you. And by doing so, people rob themselves of, one, being able to flourish as the real them, but also they rob themselves of the opportunity to grow, to flourish, to prosper, and to be the best version of themselves, because they're so busy creating a version of them that is fake. You're phony, you're fake, miss. And we don't talk about this enough, but that's another version of self-sabotage. In my mind, as I was thinking about this, I had like this vision of, let's say somebody is walking around, but all the time that they're walking around with a mask. They're walking around wearing a balaclava. They're walking around with a veil. So you never see the real them, but they operate as a version of them that perhaps they feel maybe more safe in, or They're walking around as a fake version of them they believe society will reward and society will applaud, which is unfortunate and quite sad, because then society never gets the benefit of enjoying the authentic you, enjoying the fullest version of you, enjoying all that you have to offer to the world, whether that's in your gifts, your talents, your ideas, your visions, and what you can bring to the table, simply because you're too busy operating in a realm that is not yours, a realm that is not assigned to you, a space of influence that was never meant to be yours. Whereas maybe you're supposed to be operating in media, or you're supposed to be operating within finance, you're busy operating in agriculture. And it's like two completely different places and spaces. But because you've decided that you're going to place yourself in a space or a sphere that's never meant to be yours, it means that in this area there's a gap. There's a gap where you're supposed to fill in that gap, where you're supposed to fulfill a purpose in that particular area, because you've been gifted with the talents, with the ideas, and probably the ideas that could bring so much innovation and progress in a particular space or particular sphere. Your ideas and your contributions and the diversity of your own talents that would help move that industry forward. You know, that industry is essentially robbed from that. People are robbed from your ideas because people, again, are too busy operating from fake and phony identities of who they were never meant to be. I truly believe there's a certain level of contentment, of fulfillment and peace that can only be achieved when you're walking in your purpose, when you are walking in true authenticity of who you are and who you're called to be. Living authentically and in the truth of who you are is the key to peace. I think there's a part of us, a part of our spirits and a part of our souls that are grieved when we're not walking in purpose, when we're not walking in the truth of who God called us to be. Because there's a part of us that knows that something's missing, something's not right. I'm not in alignment. I'm out of alignment. And being out of alignment with your calling, with your purpose, with who you are, brings a certain level of discomfort. That's why it's like you're agitated. Something within your spirit is not sitting right. There's an agitation, there's a discomfort, there's a level of, it's like your spirit is antsy. And that's the only way I can describe it, where it's like, I need to be somewhere, I need to be doing something, but I'm not in that place. So that's where, and I've mentioned this in the past, that's where the anxiety comes in. That's where the depression comes in. That's where discontentment comes in. That's where we don't have peace. And sometimes it robs us from our joy, because there's just something about knowing you're doing what you should be doing and you're walking according to your calling that brings you peace. Because it's like, no matter what the outcome is of what I'm doing, I know that this is what I should be doing. This is what I've been put on this earth to be doing. But I also want to note that purpose looks different in different seasons. The output may look different in different seasons. The expression of purpose is different in different seasons. So in one season, it could just be, you are a stay-at-home mom. In the next season, you are operating in a beauty business, or whatever it is that you just know intrinsically. There's just something about us as human beings. We know truly in the depths of our being. We know that there's something that we should be doing, something we should be contributing to. And I think when you walk in that, there's just such a peace within yourself. There's a fulfillment within yourself that nothing else can bring. But doing that, it's like, could you imagine being an orange tree that doesn't bear any oranges? It's useless. Truth be told, it's useless. And I think as human beings, we're the very same, in the sense that it just is, maybe as a tree, your purpose is to produce, is to create, is to be fruitful. And being fruitful doesn't necessarily mean, having a certain output, or maybe I'm working and I'm doing, so that's fruitful. But it's like, no, I'm fruitful according to what I was created for. I'm fruitful according to my purpose and according to my calling. Our contentment as people and our peace, our joy is connected to fruitfulness, and fruitfulness according to what we are purposed to do and our gifts and our talents. and our personality, and again back linked to our identity as well. So the story of Queen Esther is the perfect example of this, the link between identity, calling, and purpose. So for anyone who doesn't know, the story of Queen Esther is that she was married to a king. She was an orphan who got married to a king from a different nationality or tribe of people from her. So one day the king's council, so his advisors, decided that they were going to exterminate her people. Unbeknownst to them, she was also part of that group of that nationality, but Esther had been going essentially undercover and her identity was hidden from them. But I say that to say Queen Esther was perfectly placed in the palace to speak up for her people. And because of her position, because of her identity, identifying with those who were on the outside, on the verge of being terminated, she was able to speak to her husband, the king, and advocate for these people, advocate that their lives be saved. And she was able to use her voice to save a group, to save a whole generation of people that otherwise would have been exterminated. But I think it's interesting how for a very long time she was operating on the low key. She was operating undercover, and her identity was hidden to these people up until a point where she could no longer hide. And her hiding her identity, who she was, would have been detrimental for those people. Her hiding in silence, operating undercover, and essentially hiding from the issue would have been, again, detrimental for those people. But also the very same issues that they faced at some point might have come back to bite her, because just because you're the queen's wife doesn't mean you're exempt from this very law that has been made, that these people from this particular nationality will be offed from the face of the planet. Long story short. So for a while Esther was going incognito. She was in hiding. Her identity was hidden. But a whole generation depended on Esther unveiling her identity, using her voice, using her privilege, and using her position in the palace to stand up, to intercede for people who were on the verge of being terminated from the face of the earth. And I think that's the same thing with some people right now, where you are operating incognito, quote unquote. You're not using gifts, the talents that you've been given, your position of privilege, for the purpose that you are called to. And what a shame would it have been if Esther had said, well, that's none of my business. I'm going to stay in the palace and live soft life and just be a stay-at-home mom and, drink tea and crumpets all day long. What a shame would it have been for her to not rise up, use her voice according to her purpose, because in that moment, that was her purpose. Her purpose was to use her voice, use her position, use her favor with the king, use the gifts that were within her to intercede for her people. And this is a lesson we can all glean from. This is something that we can all learn from, because again, I think sometimes we're so caught up in what we're doing that we forget, and I mentioned this in a previous episode, that we have not been created for ourselves, our gifts, our talents, who we are. There are people, there are lives, there are destinies that are linked to our destinies. It's not just about you, it's not just about the money, it's not just about maybe going to work and getting paid, it's not just about being a mom. But if you are a mom, let's just say, for example, who you raise this child up to be will further on impact other lives. So again, it's a ripple effect. And I think sometimes we forget, and we're so focused on ourselves that we forget that we're all interconnected in one way or another, and what we do affects other people's lives. And I think Esther is a perfect example in this scenario of how one person using their voice was detrimental for a whole generation of people. So maybe you identify with what I'm saying in one area or another, whether it's the way you're showing up in your relationships, the way that you're showing up in your career, at work, or whichever way. It's time to take off the veils. If there's any way that you feel like, you know what, truth be told, in this particular area, I'm not operating as the best version of myself, or I am hiding, I am hiding from what I should be doing, my responsibilities, my purpose, and the impact I'm called to make in a particular area. This is the time to arise, and this is the time to be unveiled. This is the time for your identity to be unveiled to the people. This is the time to remove the mask, take off whichever balaclava that you've been wearing for however long, and use your identity in fulfillment of your calling, in fulfillment of your purpose, and to do what you are called to do. When we operate from timidity, when we operate from quote unquote shyness, when we operate from selfishness, in truth, we rob other people from being able to enjoy, from being able to benefit from the gifts that we have, from being able to benefit from the great ideas and the inventions that we would do. We rob the world and society from being benefited from what we have to offer simply because we are operating in hiding. We've hidden and we've buried our real authentic selves. So it's time to start operating in your true authentic self, in your calling, and taking up the spaces that have been assigned to us by God to influence, to infiltrate, to impact, and to shift. So each time you are tempted to cower back, to hide, to be timid, or to operate in a smaller version of yourself, a lesser version of yourself. Let's think about Queen Esther. Let's think about how her identity, her favor, her beauty, her privilege in the palace, even her pretty privilege in this case, wasn't for her to blend in with the palace people. It was for purpose. It was for calling. And that's what she did. That's what she achieved in that place. That's what she achieved in her position. So let me know your thoughts below. What are some things that you feel like you might be shifting after this, and in what ways are you going to be, going back to perhaps the older version of you, or maybe an elevated version of you that is walking in authenticity and real 100% rawness, without filters, without the masks, and without the veils. So something else I wanted to discuss today is the need for validation and the need for approval. Oof. The desire and the desperation for validation and approval is killing my people. The desperation, the desire to constantly have approval from people, to have validation from people, is what kills our dreams. And at some point, it gotta go. You have to let it go. I was thinking about how so much of us, again, social media has really done a number on us, okay? And one thing I believe is a killer to people's dreams, to people's visions, their ideas, their goals, their happiness, their joy, is constantly seeking for other people's approval and their validation that, oh, you're on the right track, you're doing the right thing, and I really like this thing that you're doing. Now, I want to start off by saying I completely understand that there is a space absolutely for wise counsel, particularly when it comes to maybe it's a business thing that you're doing or your career. There's absolutely space and a need for people to have wise counsel to give advice or to give direction, and to, learn from those that have come before us. Right? Now, let's put that to the side. I think it becomes dangerous when now everything we do has to be approved by other people. And that sometimes that includes the closest people to us, whether that's your friends, your family. It's like you're always looking for them to approve of, oh, I have this idea. For instance, maybe you have an idea of something that you want to do. You want to launch a business, or I don't know, you want to study a particular course in university, whatever it is that you want to do, or it's in relationships. Always seeking for your friends maybe to approve, or seeking for your parents to validate you in what you're doing. But the truth is, sometimes your vision and your idea is yours. It's yours for a reason, because only you can see it. They don't see it. They don't see it like you do. So I think it's important that we figure out, why is it that I'm so moved by the opinions of others? Why is it that I'm so moved by the validation and the external validation of other people? Why is my own opinion not enough? And we do have to come to a place where your own opinions, your own convictions are enough to move you forward, particularly when it comes to calling and purpose, is obviously that's what we're talking about here. Because truth be told, I can imagine there's so many people who have successful businesses right now, or initiatives or things that they're doing, organizations that they run, that they started and someone else said, I don't know, I don't think that's a good idea, or I don't know, how would that work, or oh, maybe that won't be the most profitable thing to do. But actually those people stood on business, and they stood in their convictions, and they did it regardless of what other people were saying, and it paid off. We also have to adopt that same mindset of, my life cannot always be determined by the validation of 2 or 3 or more. I am enough to give the go ahead. My own opinion is enough to go forward with this thing without needing 10 other people to validate it or make me feel good or make me feel like I'm doing the right thing. But as I mentioned before, of course, there are times and there are places or circumstances where you need experts, where you need expert guidance and wise counsel. Some of us are held back. Some of us are limited by the validations of other people. And I realized I was getting into a habit of maybe wanting to do things and asking other people to input their opinions and their ideas into it, which again I think is fine sometimes, but it gets to a point now where what you had originally is now tainted or shifted by other people's views and opinions, and what you then have as the end product is truly not what you intended to have to begin with, because you've let other people come in and contribute into shift and alter what it is that you wanted to do to begin with. What we also have to be careful of too, in inviting people to give their opinions or seeking validation and approval from other people, is that what it could do is that it slows down your momentum, or it will start to make you question yourself in, am I really doing the right thing? Should I really even be doing this? Is this a great idea? Whereas maybe at the beginning you were super excited about this vision that you had, this idea that you were wanting to launch. Now you're second guessing yourself because those external validations or maybe disapproval has now made you change your mind and rethink everything. So I think we have to be careful with that, because the vision was given to you. The vision is yours. The idea is yours. The idea wasn't given to a community, so it doesn't always need to be a community discussion. Your business doesn't always need to be a community discussion, because the vision is yours, the idea is yours, the business idea is yours. It's yours, and you're enough. Your opinion is enough to push it forward without needing the consultation of the whole village to come in and have their piece. We don't need everybody's 2 pence. Just use your own 2 pence and go forward. We don't always need external validation from other people. It's fine. And they will also be fine if they're not involved in the process of everything that you do. I'm reminded of the quote, if you live by their compliments, you will die by their criticism. So yeah, right now we need to free ourselves from the bondage and the prison of external validation and people's opinions, because eventually they will keep you where you are and they will not let you move forward or progress forward. So maybe part of that is building a confidence and having confidence. So maybe part of that is having a confidence in yourself and knowing that my opinions and my convictions are enough, versus having a confidence that's based on other people's opinions and other people's validations. And part of growing up is truly just being and part of growing up is growing confidence in yourself, in trusting yourself, and in having faith in your own self to execute, to do things, and to know that even if I fail, I will get back up and try again and try new and adapt, but I will make it work. And so maybe the challenge here, the question here is, in which areas am I not trusting myself enough? And am I giving my power away to others by always seeking for their validation and building my confidence on their opinions of who I am, of what I'm doing, of if I'm good enough to do something, if I'm capable enough? Am I funny enough? Am I talented enough? Am I beautiful enough? Am I smart enough to execute? And so on and so on and so on. And perhaps that's another version of self-sabotage and self-betrayal, when we give our power to other people to determine what we do with our lives, or when we give other people the power to infiltrate, to determine, to perhaps even build what is supposed to be ours. There are certain circumstances where faith in yourself should be enough, and trust in yourself to do should just be enough, without the need for external validation and external opinions, external contributions to something that is yours. But just, building trust in yourself again. But you can only build that trust if you do by yourself. And if you fail, you fail. But again, terms or conditions apply. But I think when it comes to certain things, it's okay to launch out by yourself, to do something by yourself without the need, as I mentioned earlier, for the entire village to be involved. Because now it's a community project. Because now it becomes a community project versus something that you yourself were pushing forward with, because the vision was given to you. I wanted to round that up by also saying, I think self-sabotage also looks like operating as a fake version of you, or operating under a veil, operating under a disguise, operating under an inauthentic version of who you truly are. And the truth is, you can never flourish in the fullness of who you are if you're too busy operating as a version of you that society wants you to be, or if you're conforming to that very version that society has built for you, because you're not giving yourself the opportunity to grow, to shine, and to flourish in who you are, in the authentic version of who you are. So I would love to know, what are your thoughts on some of what we've discussed today? I have enjoyed this episode, so I really want to know your thoughts down in the comment section. And don't forget to check out some other episodes as well that are out right now. I have some solo episodes that I was referring to during this episode, so don't forget to check those out as well. If you're new, don't forget to join the gang, join the community. I would love to have you here. I will see you in the next episode. Bye bye.